Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of the Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's State House reporters.
And it's been some week. I got back from D.C. Late Wednesday night, where we went up to watch the Moore v. Harper arguments, which was fun. I've never gotten to go before. And I guess I was very lucky. I ended up getting an unobstructed seat, so I was able to actually see everything that happened as well. So it was fascinating. It went for 3 hours, which I gather is really unusual for Supreme Court arguments to go so long. But boy, they did. I mean, it was a lengthy hearing, but time flew by pretty much.
Yeah, and all the justices asked questions, including Clarence Thomas, who used to at least not be. He was a guy who just didn't ask any questions at all. But I believe he asked the first question. I stand to be corrected there.
He did.
But there was a lot of probing, and I know the national media said, "Oh, well, we think based on the questions and who asked them that we don't think the most fulsome extent of this theory that Republican lawmakers are pushing here has got much chance before the court." I always find it hard to make those predictions. My takeaway from the questions the justices asked were everybody was kind of engaged. Everybody was really trying to struggle a bit with some of the nuanced questions behind what is really kind of a simple case at its core.
Right. Well, of course, it's going to be, summer probably before we get an answer on that one. But, in the meantime, it was interesting to hear reactions outside from the people involved in the case. Speaker Moore said he felt like, it was worthwhile just having gotten the case to the Supreme Court. And he said he really felt like they'd explored all the legal arguments. Well, they kind of did. And then, of course, the plaintiffs say they felt like they made their case, although Neil Katyal, who represented the plaintiffs in this case, or at least the primary plaintiffs, definitely came in for some pretty sharp questioning, especially from Justice Neil Gorsuch, who was really pushing back on some of the things that he was saying. One thing that really interested me is that, the petitioners in this case, and that's the Republican lawmakers, didn't really ask the court to overturn the state court's ruling. They said, on the face of it, we agree that it's a legitimate interpretation of the state constitution. But the justices seemed ready to run with that one. They seemed ready to take the bit in their teeth and see about overturning the decision, which would be, I don't know if it's unprecedented, but it would certainly be extremely rare. Nobody could come up with an example of it in the past for the high court to overturn a state Supreme Court's interpretation of its own constitution. Would be extremely unusual. So, but I mean, given the way the questioning went, it seems to me like there's a very serious possibility that we could see something along those lines.
Yeah, that certainly wouldn't surprise me. And maybe I should go back and just explain quickly what this case is about. When our redistricting maps were thrown out, drawn by a Republican General Assembly, thrown out by a Supreme Court that leans Democratic here in North Carolina, the Republicans said, you've gone too far. You don't have this power to throw these maps out under the state constitution because the U.S. Constitution controls how redistricting and other election laws in federal elections are to be done. It delegates that power to the state legislature. So it's not so much, hey, throw out what the Supreme Court did, the state Supreme Court did. It's what the state Supreme Court did should never have existed. It is not a power of state Supreme Courts. But it wouldn't surprise me, Laura, kind of to your point, if the High Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, found more of a middle ground where it said, all right, North Carolina, you can't do what you did here because the language you relied on in your state constitution boiled down to there shall be free and fair elections. That is not specific enough for you to find that partisan gerrymandering is against your state constitution. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. Supreme Court left room for other states, New York, Florida, some of these other states with more specific language against gerrymandering in their state constitutions, if the court left room for them to continue to do that and state courts to continue to be involved in those cases. I don't know exactly how you thread that needle. I don't know what it means for non-redistricting issues, i.e. voter ID laws in federal elections, early voting schedules, mail-in ballot rules, anything you can think of. So, I don't know. There's just a wide gamut, I think, of possibilities here for the High Court.
Right. So in the meantime, all that aside, there were things going on here in the state. One of them you reported on Tuesday, the Council of State meeting, an unexpected announcement from Josh Dobson, the Department of Labor Commissioner. And he's a fairly young guy. He's been in public service, I think, for probably 12, 14 years, something along those lines. Seemed to have a pretty promising...
He's 41 years old. 41 years old.
Yeah. I mean, seems to have a pretty promising political career ahead of him, and he announced this week that he's not going to run for re-election. Did he give any reason?
He didn't give a great one, just kind of said it was time to step away. Said, there's no health problems, no scandal here. I don't know that I have a full handle on why this decision was made, and I have not had an in-depth conversation with him. We talked a bit. But he said he wanted to announce it early because he wanted to give people time to set up their campaigns. 2 years is pretty early, but I mean, here we go. And Laura, I think this is the first time in anyone's memory, at least that I've talked to, we expect 6 out of 10 Council of State positions. Council of State being the statewide elected positions in North Carolina government. 6 of 10 should be open. So Josh Dobson as labor, he's gone. Governor, Roy Cooper is term limited. Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson is running for governor. Attorney General, Josh Stein is running for governor. Treasurer, Dale Falwell is probably running for governor. Agriculture, this has not been announced, so this is not final, but we've been hearing for a while that Steve Troxler is very seriously considering hanging it up, won't run for re-election. 6 of 10 open Council of State seats. Laura, you ever heard anything? You ever seen anything like that?
Well, I mean, they're usually contested, excuse me, but for 6 of 10 of them to be like wide open, obviously, very interesting. And, we saw a big sweep. Well, I won't say a sweep, but we saw Republicans take the majority of those seats in 2020. So, I'm sure they're looking at the possibility that they could take even more of them probably in 2024. But no, it is interesting, and I will be interested to know, if we ever hear why it is that Dobson is stepping away.
Yeah, and I will also mention I spoke to Secretary of State Elaine Marshall and Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey Tuesday. I was at an event with them. They're both going to run. I haven't talked to Beth Wood, the state auditor, or Kathy Truitt, the state superintendent of schools, but we would certainly expect them to seek re-election. That would be surprising if they did not. So, it's going to be an interesting 2024, to say the least. I mean, with the governor's race, we already knew it was going to be interesting. And then now we've got all these other open seats. And I should have mentioned, if I didn't, Dobson is going to finish out his term. So he's not leaving office. He's going to take 2 years here and finish out his term. He's just not going to run again. And what he said, I was just looking it up here, he said that it's, quote, time to step out of elected office, and it's nothing more, it's nothing less than that. He also said that he has no earthly idea what the future holds.
Okay, well, I guess he's reached his limit. Then the Charlotte Observer this week had really interesting reporting on a casino that has links to House Speaker Tim Moore. And this has to do with a federal investigation into the Catawba Nation's Two Kings Casino in Kings Mountain. I understand that Tim Moore is the attorney for a party in that lawsuit. Is that right?
That's right. There's some sort of problem with the management agreement between the Catawba tribe and Skyboat, which is a company that is going to run this casino. Apparently, it ceded too much authority. Tim Moore is or has been Skyboat Gaming's attorney, so it'll be interesting to see if this issue ensnares him in some way. The bunch of local officials that have been involved. The Charlotte Observer has done some good reporting on this, and I would recommend people read that. I mean, it's a year-plus investigation, according to their reporting, by the National Indian Gaming Commission. And this company and the tribe face up to $57,000 a day in fines. Those fines have not been levied yet, but I mention it. You don't do year-long investigations and talk about $57,000 a day fines for just some missing paperwork that didn't get filled out right. So stay tuned.
In the meantime, you did On the Record this week. You hosted it, and looking at education policy. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that'll run Saturday at 7:30 on WRAL. We rerun it Sunday mornings on Fox, and it'll be available online if you just search WRAL On the Record. For those that don't know, that's our weekly policy roundtable show. Had a number of experts on education, teacher, someone from the state superintendent's office, president of NCAE, Tamika Walker-Kelly, joined us. Also a teacher of the year, the current teacher of the year, Leah Harper. We just talked a lot of stuff is going on right now, right, Laura? We got Leandro, the lawsuit over education funding. We've got a overhaul of how we pay and license teachers. The State Board of Education just recently moved that up forward, although it's just a pilot project and the horizons of it aren't set. The General Assembly is going to decide that in 2023, this coming year. The science of reading is interesting. That's this kind of shift toward more work, looking at phonics and using different techniques to teach reading. That's underway. Pandemic, learning loss, that had such an impact on our students. We talk about all these things, and take a look at it. I noticed that Kathy Truitt, State Superintendent, is also on front row this week discussing learning loss, pandemic learning loss in schools, so a lot of school stuff. And I will mention on the pilot program to change the way we license and pay teachers. I spoke to the governor about that this week. The state board had initially talked about moving forward with something statewide, taking that to the General Assembly. They rolled it back to this pilot project. He said he thought that was the smart thing to do because it was a complicated proposal. He also said he likes the idea of tying teacher evaluation to teacher pay, which is one of the more controversial elements of the plan. The governor said that he thought that was a good way to entice Republicans at the General Assembly into increasing pay, i.e., if you don't pair it with some sort of new evaluation or more robust evaluation process, he doesn't think that the big salary increases in this plan would go through. So,
right, and it's going to be
7:30 Saturday night.
It's going to be intriguing to watch how that unfolds at the legislature this next year, because there are concerns I know from teachers groups that if they try to put this through piecemeal, that what's going to happen is that the legislature is going to approve stricter standards for teachers, but not higher pay. And so they're going to have to basically design a package that's going to include all these moving parts. And I have a feeling that's going to be a pretty heavy lift on the part of leadership over there to come up with a package that can pass both the House and Senate and make it across the governor's desk. So I'll be intrigued to watch that. Speaking of leadership, we're not seeing any big changes in leadership in either of the chambers. We learned this week that the last person we were waiting to hear about, and that was Robert Reeves, will be the House leader again for the Democrats. Of course, Gail Adcock, who is a current whip, is going to be moving into the Senate. She won that election last month. So there's going to be a new Deputy House Democratic leader, and that's going to be Ashton Clemens in Guilford County.
Yeah, Ashton Clemens out of Guilford for deputy leader, and then conference chair is going to be Cynthia Ball from here in Wake County. Legislative chair will be Brandon Lofton from Mecklenburg. And Reeves' office said that in January, those are all appointments, by the way. Reeves is elected leader, and these are appointments. And then in January, Democrats will elect their whips. They'll have 3 whips, and some freshman members will elect co-chairs for their own class. Freshmen have their own little subset of leadership. So that's all coming together and kind of going to chalk. I don't think there are any big surprises there, although I'm not as privy to the inner workings of the caucuses as I might be to other things.
Well, we did see some of the sort of leaders of the caucus move into the Senate this year, so it'll be. I'm curious to see who comes up to fill their shoes in that caucus. In the meantime, we remember that Thomas Stith departed the head of the State Board of Community Colleges over the summer, and we learned just, I think yesterday, that the community colleges has, the Presidential Search Committee has finally named a search firm to recruit the next leader of the system. Right now we have an interim leader who has been there before. It seems like it's taken them a while to agree on a search firm, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know what to read into this. Stith, they got rid of him in July, and then now it's December, and they're hiring a search firm. It feels like you either don't hire a search firm or you do that on the front end. So I don't know, were they unable? A committee to pick a new president has been meeting. Is this just they couldn't all get on the same page? They're starting over. They actually have some candidates, but want a search firm to vet it. I don't know. I'm just throwing those out there. I texted a member of the community college board, basically, hey, what do I read into this? And the answer was did not respond. So I wish I had more information for everybody there, but I think it is worth us noting, even if we don't really understand what it means.
In the meantime, developments in the world of our Congress critters. The Republican takeover of the U.S. House means that a couple of our Republican caucus members will be ascending to some leadership positions. Patrick McHenry, I understand, is going to be the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, and that's a pretty powerful committee, isn't it?
That's a big one. Yeah, anytime you got money right there in the title, that's a nice one.
Right, and then Virginia Fox in the running for House Education and Labor Chair. So, and she's got a lot of seniority in that caucus, of course. Excuse me, but it's interesting. Speaking of Virginia Fox, I just have to mention I saw her at the Supreme Court this week, and she was sitting right next to Deborah Ross, and the two of them are just chatting away. So, people you don't necessarily expect to be sitting next to each other. But it was great to see. It was great to see, the sort of the collegiality.
Yeah, there's an odd couple. I'd watch that show. Put them in an apartment together. Yeah, I'd watch that.
Yeah, interesting. In the meantime, Senator-elect Budd announcing that he's picked a couple of members of his staff for the U.S. Senate. I understand that I'm not as familiar with these folks as you are, but I think that these are folks who have worked for other North Carolina members, right?
Yeah, Tucker Knott going to be Chief of Staff, Chad Galinsky, Deputy Chief of Staff. I'm not super familiar with them, but they've had jobs with multiple members of North Carolina's various congressional delegations over the years. So yeah. They'll be in those roles. That was announced this week.
And the Justice Center, we should mention, has a new leader, Reginald Shuford. I don't know very much about him. I guess he's been up in Pennsylvania serving as the executive director of the ACLU up there, but he is in fact a graduate of the Chapel Hill Law. He's from Wilmington. So he's going to be replacing Rick Glazer, who announced that he's going to be leaving back this summer to head up, I think it's a law clinic at, I'm not sure if it's Central or Campbell.
Interesting. Yeah, of course, Rick Glazer, former Democrat in the North Carolina House, fairly well known around the state. And yeah, like you said, right. Shuford coming from Pennsylvania, where he was head of the ACLU. So just wanted to note that little changeover.
And just to mention a meeting of the worlds here, Glazer, before he was a legislator, was one of the attorneys involved in Leandro. So he was kind of influential in some of the Democrats' moves to shore up funding for low-resource schools and disadvantaged students. That happened in the 2000s before the Republicans took over the House, or took over the legislature, I should say. And Glazer moved to, I'm not sure how long he's been over at the Justice Center, but I think it's been quite some time. Just a very influential sort of legal thinker. So he seems like a natural fit to lead up a community law clinic.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been around the block a few times. So I'll mention one last thing. There was a dedication ceremony this week at the Department of Insurance. This was something that was supposed to happen in 2020, got delayed by the pandemic. The hearing room for insurance rate cases was dedicated to Jim Long, longtime insurance commissioner in the state, known for wearing a red tie all the time. So his family came and they dedicated that, and that was a nice little ceremony.
Long was a heck of a character. He was serving as insurance commissioner when I first started reporting on North Carolina politics back in 2004. And I remember that he actually passed away on the job. I think he was in the legislative office building. And that's when Wayne Goodwin became the insurance commissioner, succeeded him because he was the deputy at the time. But Jim Long used to always refer to himself as the oldest rat in the barn because he knew literally everybody. And he was kind of one of those old school politicians that was a Democrat but probably could have passed for either one depending on where you went, and just got along with everybody and pretty much knew everybody, and just was a huge force in the party at the time, and just a fascinating character.
Yep. And that's I think all I've got.
That's about all I've got too. We should mention a couple quick mentions. Falwell, Treasurer Falwell today put out a press release blasting the CEO of BlackRock, an investment group, for his involvement in environmental and social good, ESG, sort of social, call it social conscience investing, trying to use money as a way to encourage corporations to do more things for the environment and for the social good. Falwell calling it whacktivism, which is something that Elon Musk apparently, I won't say coined, but has been using recently. So interesting to take a page from Elon Musk there. And, it's certainly kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. It makes you wonder a little bit whether this is sort of gearing up for setting up a platform for a gubernatorial run. I don't think we have that confirmed yet, but it certainly looks like it could fit into that that hole rather, pretty neatly. And then also we saw Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson in Moore County this week he was down there, responding to the massive power outage that was caused by the act of, some say vandalism, some say, well, criminal mischief, call it what you like. So it seems like we're already seeing maybe a little bit of movement in that 2024, what looks like a likely 2024 primary on the Republican side for the governor's race.
Yeah, a Robinson v. Folwell race is kind of the best guess right now on the Republican side. But it won't be long before people start. I don't know. You've been around longer than me. When is the appropriate time to announce a run for governor in 2024? Is it the first quarter of 2023? Is it more mid-summer 2023? Do you wait till the fall?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I think every cycle it sort of gets earlier and earlier, and a lot of that has to do with locking down funding, right? Because if you come out and you appear to have a lot of support, then it sort of discourages other people from getting into the race. So I would expect to see something probably in the next couple of months, at least from those names, if it's going to happen, and then it'll be, we'll wait and see who else might want to put their hat in the ring as well.
Yep, absolutely. The time grows near.
I think that is just about all for this week. Next week there are a couple of oversight meetings, committee meetings, so of course we'll be running herd on those as well, and we'll bring you that and anything else that happens, I guess, in NC Paul here on the Wrap. Thanks for joining us.